Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Hello, Ankit. Good afternoon.
Sir, a lot of predictions were happening. Up until the exit poll, everyone almost had an equal chance of winning the winning a large majority of seats in the Bihar election. But now that most of the results are out, it seems clear that the NDA is going to form the government in Bihar. Does this come as a shocker to you?
Not at all. If you go by the exit poll results,
Hmm.
most of the exit poll predictions were that NDA probably would have a comfortable majority.
Hmm.
And two, the challenge for the people of Bihar, the voters of Bihar, is do we trust a stable and steady government with some modicum of progress, not much of development, but at least some modicum of progress, some improvement in infrastructure, and some minimal rule of law, as opposed to what uh, the BJP and JDU called Jangil Raj.
Hmm.
And I think there are still very fresh memories of complete breakdown of rule of law in the earlier era. And therefore, I think they're able to communicate that very effectively. The only thing going in favor of the opposition is give us a chance.
Hmm.
Look at a new face.
Hmm.
Now, without a coherent and sensible agenda, saying that look at a new face and give us a chance for far too long, Nitish Kumar has been chief minister is a very weak argument.
Hmm.
Because of our media's, for want of a better expression, I'm saying, a lack of creativity and
Hmm.
imagination. They thought that was a powerful argument. The fact that you need a new face, whereas people want a new purpose. So it was not very surprising, but perhaps the sweep is surprising. From what I see, I understand almost 80% of the seats are won by the ruling combine. But
Hmm.
again, in the first past the post system, once the verdict is decisive, they get disproportionate number of the seats. I'm
Hmm.
sure the voting percentages are not perhaps that different,
Absolutely.
but clearly the voters have expressed their choice for continuity, for economic growth, and balancing welfare with infrastructure and growth. And I think that's what is reflected in the verdict.
Right, sir. Absolutely. Sir, RJD, the main opposition until the opposition in Bihar Assembly was talking about they had come up with a very I would say populist manifesto. You had also talked about it previously. You have written about it, but RJD's the proposal, the plan has been rejected by the electorate of Bihar. Does that mean that the Bihar citizenry, the Bihar voters are not really going to go for populist measures and they want some modicum of development?
It's a great question, Ankit. You are absolutely right. That the poorest state of India, whose per capita income is only one-fifth of perhaps the better off states, has rejected outrageous short-term welfare measures at the cost of the long-term good is actually a very pleasant and happy development. And as you said rightly, there's only a modicum of development that's happening in Bihar, but even that would be denied if
Hmm.
RJD were to fulfill its promises. Some of the promises were shocking. Like every family, every household will get a government job with a guaranteed 30,000 rupees per month salary is an absurd proposition. As we have earlier made public, there are about 2.5 crore families in the state. In all of India, in the union government, state governments, and public sector undertakings, the total number of government jobs right now are about 1.8 to 2 crore. So in Bihar, one state alone, there'll be more government employees than all the government employees of the union and the states put together and the public sector undertakings put together in all of India. There cannot be anything more absurd than that. Of course, it's impossible. It will never happen. Just again, to carry the logic, if you take the expenditure involved in the promises made by the RJD, the total commitment exceeds the GSDP of the state. That means the total wealth created by all people of Bihar, the Kisans, the Mazdoor, the professionals, the employees, government, private, farmers, everybody put together, the total wealth created is still not adequate to meet only the government commitments made in this election, which is ridiculous. Of course, again, impossible. That means even 100% tax if you collect. That
Hmm.
means farmers produce the agricultural produce, but they have nothing to eat. They give everything to government. Let us assume the worst case, the absurd case.
Hmm.
Even then, it's not enough to meet the obligations. that such promises could be made, that the absurdity of these promises are not made serious electoral issue shows how risky our political process has become. That's what really bothers me. It doesn't matter who wins, who loses. We're only one election away from chaos in the country. And I mean it. I'm not saying this casually. We are just one election away from chaos in this country. Earlier, the two main formations in every state in the country used to have a reasonably balanced approach. They were trying to reconcile the short term individual welfare with the long term economic growth, investment, infrastructure, etc. And that reconciliation is vital. Within that, there used to be some shades. One party a little bit more for welfare, another party a little bit more for growth. But now the contrast is very dangerous. A democracy at our phase of development cannot afford that. One electoral verdict of the wrong kind of people believe in these very dangerous promises and go for short-term individual welfare and completely destroy the possibility of economic growth, employment generation, wealth creation. It will spell disaster for a poor country like India and a poor state like Bihar. So elections have become a very knife-edge thing, not for the candidates. I'm also disappointed to note the newspaper headlines and the even All India Radio headlines. And or some of the channels headlines I was watching. I was listening to them when I go for the walks in the morning. What is the language used? In this first phase of election or second phase of election in Bihar, this applies to every state when elections are held. The newscaster basically essentially says the voters are determining the fate of the 1,300 candidates contesting. That means the idea is that we are determining the fate of the candidates. Election is about the candidates. There cannot be a more disastrous idea than that. Election is about the voters. It's about our tax money. It's about what happens to our future. Nothing damaging is going to happen to the candidates, and that's not what the election is about. It's not about determining the fates of the candidates. But even the unintended consequences of the language you're using, we're not realizing, because that's become part of the culture. We think if somebody is elected as an MLA, then his life is made, no matter what the people's lives are. That means no matter who is elected, we the people are always losing. Now, this must change. So this is scary. I must be very candid. I'm very scared for our democracy until we reach a situation where a majority of voters realize what is in their long-term best interest, in their children's best interest, infrastructure, investment, wealth creation, job creation, earning capacity, and incomes. That is the only route to prosperity. Now, until a majority believes that the economic growth is actually helping them, that it is inclusive, it's not merely helping a few people in Patna or in Bengaluru or in Hyderabad, but it's helping me and my children. And if this continues, I'll be better off. My family will come out of poverty. Unless that belief is there, unless the political parties and the administration work towards making the growth effective and inclusive, so that people know that their future is secure, until that time, our democracy is in grave danger. So we are living from election to election, scared, because as I said before, we are only one election away from chaos in the country. It doesn't matter which party. I do not care which party is elected, which MLA is elected, because the methods deployed by and large are very similar. So what really is important is, can all of us, the middle classes, the media, the business class, the political leaders and the elite political parties and the bureaucracy, the elites of the country, can we bury the hatchet and create a growth process that is inclusive and effective for a sustained period so that the majority of people feel growth is touching their lives? To me, that's an issue that we have to confront in the basis of this election and several elections in several states in the country.
Right. So if you look at the allies of NDA in Bihar election, BJP, JDU, RJD, and even Chirag Paswan's party, all of these four parties are allies at the union level also. And that is what exactly the NDA government, NDA alliance was trying to sell in Bihar election, saying it is a double engine Sarkar. So does the double engine narrative really work on voters' mind?
I am very uncomfortable, Ankit, about double engine narrative. In a federal system, for any federal government, say, at the governing party at the federal level, say, that development will happen only if the same party is in power in the state also, it's anti-federal. So I don't buy that argument. Uh, for instance, in Karnataka and Telangana, the ruling party or their allies, they have lost the election. Does it mean that the people don't want development? So that's a very dangerous rhetoric. It's a political rhetoric, basically. I don't think we should buy that. But what is more important is, and that is what is significant now in Bihar, relatively speaking, certain parties in the country are exhibiting some degree of fiscal discipline and some concern for long-term economic growth, investment, infrastructure, and wealth creation. Whereas some other parties, either because they completely despair of getting to power, or whatever reason, they have thrown all caution to the winds. They are completely ignoring the imperatives of economic growth and infrastructure and investment in the country. And they are only offering all kinds of short-term individual welfare measures at the cost of the long-term good of the poorest people of India. Now, as I said before, it is necessary to take care of the people in desperate straits. For instance, if there is real starvation, it's our duty to make sure that starvation is not there. After all, there is a moral imperative. There is also a political imperative. In a poor country, you cannot only offer the long-term growth, you also have to offer some short-term relief. Even a country like the United States, in the shutdown period, we discovered there are some 43 million people in the United States, they get food stamps. So in the richest country on planet Earth, still 43 million people, about 12-15% of the people, they get practically free food. Now, when that is the case, you cannot say individual welfare can be completely given up. You cannot and you should not. But if there is no balance between individual short-term welfare and the long-term economic growth, infrastructure, investment, and wealth creation, then a country like India is perpetually condemned to poverty, ignominy, and millions upon millions will have miserable lives, even after another generation or two. We cannot afford that. And that will be a disaster for the poorest of the poor in the country. And that is where the real problem is. For now, in Bihar, because the choice, in sharp contrast, people made a choice. But until we wake up, the elites of India wake up, the segments that I mentioned, the 5 segments I mentioned, the politicians, the bureaucrats, the media, the business class, and the middle class, unless we all wake up and figure out how to ensure that the benefits of growth, the fruits of growth reach the bulk of the people in a measurable way, and therefore they feel that growth is in their interest. Unless we create those conditions, we'll be perpetually in a panic mode. Each election is potentially spelling a disaster. We're only one election away from chaos. And that should bother all of us.
Right. So speaking of short-term relief, 1 month back, right, exactly a month before the elections, the JDU government had transferred about 10,000 rupees to 21 lakh women beneficiaries, a total cost of around 2,100 crores, a part of a larger scheme which the estimated expenditure is around 7,000 crores. How do you see that? That happened just 1 month before the elections.
No, there's no question. As I said before, today we come to a situation where if a political party says, I will not offer short-term individual relief or welfare, I promise you, I will ensure infrastructure, quality school education and higher education, quality healthcare, investment opportunities, and business-friendly environment, and economic growth, and job creation and wealth creation, and incomes for all of you, but it will take time and hard work. I think that party, if you do not offer some kind of short-term relief also, will lose the polls hands down. That's why I gave you the example of the United States. Therefore, now it's not the question of whether there should be welfare or not. Whether the welfare is realistic, sustainable, and is it combined judiciously with genuine economic growth project, a credible, a believable program for economic growth and investment. I think some parties are making that effort. So the issue is not whether somebody will offer freebies or not offer freebies. You have to offer welfare. Even rich countries in a democracy, you cannot simply sustain a government because, after all, you're elected with the willing consent of the people. It's not the most intelligent or the most honest or the most capable person who's elected. It is the most acceptable person that's elected. And in a country like ours with so many inequalities, that acceptability will not come unless some amount of welfare is there. So is there a judicious mix? Is there a proven track record of an effort to improve infrastructure and economic growth and investment, or is it entirely the short-term delivery of individual welfare? That is, I think, the contrast. Now, 2,100 crore for Bihar is not a big amount, or even 7,000 crore is not a big amount. Sometimes, we use words without quantitatively measuring what is happening. Let me give you a slightly different example. Now, Maharashtra, when the old age pension was 1,100 rupees per month, old age, widow pension, physically handicapped, etc. I think the Maharashtra BJP and the whatever Shiv Sena you call Shiv Sena and NCP in the ruling combined, they offered before the last assembly election, I think 1,500 rupees. They actually increased it. They probably offered in the electoral promise 1,800 or 2,000 something. Many people said, "My God, freebies." Maharashtra is a rich state with low debt GDP ratio, with very high per capita income, with tremendous growth momentum. And this is a very affordable amount given the Maharashtra's fiscal realities. Take Andhra Pradesh, which is in desperate straits, something like 60 to 65% total debt GDP ratio if you include the off-budget loans and if you include the commitments that are not honored, pending bills. 60-65% highest in India. Andhra Pradesh increased the old age pensions to 4,000 rupees. So it's not, my God, you increased from 1,100 to 1,500 rupees. That's a very uninformed kind of a discussion. What is your debt GDP ratio? What is your per capita income? What is the fiscal situation? Is there a big revenue deficit? Is there a big fiscal deficit? Is the state on the growth path or not? Is there enough money allocated and wisely utilized for infrastructure and investment? Is investment coming in, growth taking place, jobs are created? And then are we spending some money on welfare? Or you ignore all the economic growth issues and merely use welfare as the only means of attracting the voters? That is the challenge. So every state, take for instance Orissa. Naveen Patnaik's government, Biju Janata Dal, did a very credible job, in my opinion, for about 20 years. Certainly, they also had welfare programs. They were also popular. But at the same time, they ensured economic growth, fiscal probity, and some kind of a judicious use of resources, a healthy revenue surplus, and a lot of investment, both through revenue surplus and borrowings, that took place. So it is that overall comprehension of the economic situation, economic management that should be examined, not nitpicking selectively some data and attacking indiscriminately all political parties. Because politicians, as I said before, have the moral imperative of addressing the challenge of poverty. They also have the political imperative of getting the willing consent of the poor people. So are they doing at the cost of the long-term future and the fiscal health, or are they doing keeping that in mind with a degree of balance between economic growth momentum and the short-term welfare?
Right. One of the key players in this election, sir, was Prashant Kishore. Prashant Kishore was touted as being the kingmaker, so to say, or the analysts were predicting to him to be one of the key players in the formation of the government. But if you see the vote, if you see the results, Prashant Kishore and his party is nowhere seen in the voting percentages. What do you think has happened to that argument? Because Prashant Kishore was talking about education, he was talking about employment, he was talking about healthcare. So is it a loss for Prashant Kishore and the Jan Swaraj party, or the argument itself has failed?
No, first of all, electoral system is the issue. A third party will find ordinarily extraordinarily difficult to make an impact in elections in our country. Take Congress, a party that governed most of India for most of the period after independence. There are so many states where Congress is irrelevant, and it's very difficult for it to regain the old stature. Take Andhra Pradesh today, for instance. Take several other states. Similarly, take BJP, which is very successful electorally for the past 10, 15 years all over the country. And yet in states where they are a distant third, like Tamil Nadu, like Andhra Pradesh on their own, like some other state, they're not able to make a headway. It is the quirk of the electoral system. The first past the post system rewards only the two top players. A third player, unless you are entirely a casteist force with a local caste base, then you may have some local impact. The 1 year party, for instance, PMK in Tamil Nadu. Some other party entirely casteist, but with some local base, with concentrated voters, at least in a few pockets, you may make some impact. Otherwise, for a third party to make an impact in the elections, it requires one of the major parties to commit electoral suicide. Like, for instance, Andhra Pradesh, Congress party committed electoral suicide. The space was quickly occupied by the Jagan Congress, YSR Congress. So such a thing might happen. Similarly, the Congress party, for whatever reason, lost steam suddenly in Delhi at a certain phase of Delhi's electoral cycle, 2013-14 period. Suddenly, AAP occupied that vacuum. In Punjab, Akali Dal, after long years in power, they lost steam and lost credibility. Suddenly, AAP occupied the space.
Right.
So, unless some such thing happens, a political vacuum is created, therefore a credible force can occupy the space with adequate media exposure, etc. Otherwise, it's virtually impossible for a third party in India to make a significant electoral impact contesting elections. Unless, as I said, it's a caste-based party with some local caste concentrated base here and there. Now, Prashant Kishore's party, Jan Swaraj party, I think raised the right issues. Whatever be the individuals' own proclivities and their own record earlier, they raised the right issues. And those issues should be examined. You must not examine or you must not judge Prashant Kishore's party by the electoral success or failure. You must examine by the relevance of the agenda that they are articulating.
Okay.
And I think that should be taken very seriously. Because of Prashant Kishore's otherwise media profile, as an election manager earlier, with a degree of success, media gave excessive coverage. It doesn't mean that he failed, nor does it mean that he could have succeeded if only it were a little different. There was very little chance. Anybody who had some understanding of electoral politics in India, they knew that. But his message and that voice is important. We should embrace that. Typically, in an electoral system like ours, change happens when you demonstrate that there is some traction to a certain argument. Some people are willing to support that. And I think the major parties then embrace that and then make it their agenda. That is the best way forward rather than who wins and who loses. I don't know the electoral voting percentage finally. Probably, Jan Swaraj party might have gotten single-digit number, but even 4 or 5% if they get it, it's not insignificant. Trust me. Don't treat that lightly. A 5% vote in a state of population of 12.5 crores, abject party in the face of monetary, then it's perhaps no about electoral struggle. The candidates and that is fight elections as if it's a matter of life or death. In the face of that, for any party to get even 4 or 5% vote is not a small thing. What is important is look at the agenda. Is it sensible? Now, how to make the agenda relevant for the country, irrespective of who is in power? I think that's the way to look at it rather than who wins, who loses. Or if you win, that means everything is wonderful. Your fate is determined. Like I mentioned to you, what the AIR or some other mass media very unwisely say, the fate of candidates is going to be determined in this election. It's an absurd way of looking at the power struggle. It's about our lives. It's the fate of the state, fate of the people, the taxpayers, and the voters that's decided, not the fate of the candidates or a political party.
Right. So, with the memory of Jungle Raj, the period of misgovernance still fresh in voters' minds, the alternative argument from the RJD side was that give us a chance, give us an opportunity. That has failed. These two things, this argument has failed in the minds of the voters. And with the ruling combine has now got an even more, even bigger majority. Like you rightly mentioned in the start, a sweep basically. So, and 25 years have already passed in the current combine, and now 5 more years. Do you think that the ruling government in Bihar will be lenient or not lenient, I would say, but do you think it will be they'll have a lackadaisical approach to governance?
That will be suicidal for Bihar. That will be tragic for India. I hope not. Because there are three things that people of Bihar have a right to expect, and people of India have a right to demand. Number one, what is usually expected of the BJP NDA governments, that infrastructure, economic growth, investment push will be there. And I'm reasonably confident that push will continue. But that's not enough. Then second thing is, are we going to significantly improve the quality of school education? Because that is the most important equalizer in a desperately poor state.
Hmm.
A kid in a rural Bihar from a poor family is as bright as a kid from, let's say, urban Karnataka or Gujarat or Maharashtra.
Hmm.
There's absolutely no difference in genetic endowment or the capacity. It is what you have done in terms of giving the opportunity for these kids that matters. So if you want to eliminate poverty in a modern society, you have to ensure that there is quality education available to every single child irrespective of the circumstances of birth. At least to start with at school level, eventually improve the college education so that they can be partners in the modern economy. Similarly, quality healthcare, rule of law.
Hmm.
Don't merely say we're not Jungle Raj, therefore we're better than others.
Hmm.
Actually, institute rule of law in every which way.
Hmm.
Small town development. Ensure there's economic growth, which is well-rounded, not merely limited to Patna, but every small town grows, and low-end jobs with low wages, low skills, they're available at plenty, so that a large number of rural youth can be accommodated, employed there with in situ urbanization. You don't have to go to distant cities. There's nothing wrong with migration. Millions of Biharis are working all over the country. I know many people in Hyderabad. In my own apartment complex, there are several Biharis, very hardworking Biharis. But if the poorest people are forced to migrate to a distant big city, what is happening?
Hmm.
They are forced to go alone because they cannot afford to take their family. They have no local social support system. They live in a ramshackle housing accommodation somewhere in the outskirts of the town or city. They have to commute 10, 15 kilometers each side to get any kind of minimal work. One day they have no work, they face starvation. One day they fall sick because there's no support system, they face a catastrophe. And there's no family, there's no khandan, there's no social network to support them also. So these lives of misery are very dangerous. So people who have relatively higher skills, if they migrate to big cities within the state or the rest of the country, that's perfectly good. But if the poorest people are forced to migrate to distant big cities, then economic model is wrong
Hmm.
because big cities cannot accommodate them. Their lives cannot be very pleasant. And locally, you're not allowing growth. So small town development with basic infrastructure, some skill promotion, and encouragement of economic activity locally, and creating conditions in which economic activity will flourish. If you have Gunda Raj,
Hmm.
if you have all kinds of failure of rule of law, then people will not invest locally. So, are you going for that kind of a framework of improving governance? And ultimately, is there going to be a sustained high growth which is inclusive of everybody in
Hmm.
all parts of the state? And even then, it will take another 25 to 30 years of intense hard work for Bihar to be where even the rest of India is, let alone Bihar becoming developed. Because a per capita income of 69 or 70,000 rupees is abysmally low. It's almost on par with Sub-Saharan Africa. It's
Hmm.
on par with the poorest countries on planet Earth.
Right.
So we have an opportunity, but we have a long way to go. And I've always argued, even 20 years ago when Mr. Nitish Kumar became chief minister, Bihar deserves the help from the rest of India. We
Hmm.
must generously help because if Bihar does not flourish, India will not flourish. If UP does not flourish, India will not flourish. So we must all be very generous in our own interest. Because unless certain benchmark level of development is there in every corner of India, particularly the major states, it will affect the whole of India, our markets, our economic growth momentum, and our
Hmm.
sense of self-confidence as a country. All these are dependent on what Bihar does with itself. And I believe we all have to lend a helping hand. And I hope that Bihar will find a way forward in this extraordinarily difficult situation.
Right. You've enumerated what the priorities should be for the NDA, incoming NDA government, sir. What do you think is the road ahead for RJD?
It's not for me to tell political parties what they do. They are better judges of their context, their situation. Who am I but a humble person? I don't think I can get the worst that RJD got, so I cannot really tell them. But my appeal to them, more than advice, my very humble appeal to all the political parties, and particularly parties that are disappointed with electoral verdicts, is
Hmm.
India is changing. India must change for the better. You cannot take India backwards. While welfare is required, short term individual welfare as the sole means of political mobilization is a disaster. We are condemning our people to perpetual poverty and penury. We have to judiciously combine with genuine long term economic growth opportunities, but inclusive.
Hmm.
Now, there is a lot of agenda. If you feel that BJP and their allies are walking away with victory after victory, then I believe there are areas where they are not paying sufficient attention. You can have a system of local courts to render justice to ordinary people, at least in small cases, very quickly. You can focus entirely on the quality of school education. It's not the expenditure that matters, the quality of school education outcomes so that everybody gets an opportunity. You can focus on healthcare delivery at a relatively low cost so that the out-of-pocket expenditure, which is killing or impoverishing millions of people in the country, that's a thing of the past. You can focus on the electoral system, which is forcing people to pay. Bihar may not be very guilty of that, but the electoral system is forcing people to spend lavishly on voting, to buy the votes, to induce the voters. And therefore, enormous expenditure, illegitimate expenditure for elections is hurting the country and our democracy and perpetuating poverty. You can fight for a better electoral system. You can fight for local governance because India is very highly centralized at the state level, not at the national level. Local governments exist on paper, but they're irrelevant except in Kerala. Without effective local governance, accountable local governance, we can never improve our democracy. Services will never reach the people. We will forever depend on either the local thug or a political worker or small bureaucracy, paying briberies, subjecting to themselves to extortionary demands will become endemic, which is continuing in the country. So local government empowerment. There's a whole lot of agenda that is not adequately taken up by the establishment in the country today. Please find that agenda rather than the soulless, the unimaginative agenda of merely giving a job to every household, giving money which you do not have, and driving a state into perpetual debt, and therefore killing the future. If you borrow recklessly without creating productive and usable assets for the next generation, you're basically indulging in grand theft of the future. You're robbing the people of the future. Bihar people deserve a future. People of every state of India deserve a better future because the present is not good enough for a large number of them. Maybe for a few very wealthy people, it's good enough. But for the bulk of the people of India, the present is not good enough. And if the future is to be good, you must build the future. You cannot rob the future. You cannot take away the future from these people. You cannot force the system to borrow heavily only for the current expenditure without taking care of the future needs and building infrastructure and creating assets which are useful and productive for the future. This is my humble appeal to all the political parties. Trust the people of India. They understand it. They understand the importance of school education. The poorest families are spending out of pocket a lot of money in the hope that the kids get better education. But even then, it's not happening because of government failure. Our healthcare is in shambles despite some efforts here and there. Indebtedness is the single biggest reason in the country. Impoverishment, single biggest reason in the country is the out-of-pocket expenditure in healthcare. Local governments are weak. So there's a huge agenda. Please be imaginative and care for the people. Don't think of elections as a process determining your fates. It is a process that determines the fates of the vote givers and the taxpayers, not the candidates and the political parties. Once they have that notion, I think they'll be a part of a very constructive political process, paving way for a better future.
Right. Thank you for sharing your perspective today, sir. And we really appreciate you taking out the time and doing this, even though the logistics were not favorable from your end.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.